Let's go.
Kasim is in the Tracker Academy.
Just wait a second. It takes a while. Okay, you can start, Herman.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on what's new for developers in the latest version of the application platform from DHIS2. We hope that you're able to join us and learn about some of the exciting new features that we've added to several of the tools that we build for application developers. I'm also excited to start off this webinar with a presentation of our newest developer advocate, who has joined our team just this month and is probably very overwhelmed with everything that DHIS2 encompasses. But we're very excited to have him on board and to see what we can do to enhance the community of developers and the learning material and the connection that we have with third-party developers all over the world. So with that, I'll turn it over to Herman to introduce himself very quickly.
Yeah, hello, thank you, Austin. So my name is Herman Viscuso, you know that. So I just joined the DHIS team as a developer advocate, and I'm originally from Buenos Aires. I just wanted to tell you where I come from, right? But I live in Madrid with my family right now. So just to give you a bit of information about my background, I was a computer nerd since I was around 8 years old. But I have a formal computer system, education at university. And after focusing a lot on software development, I had the opportunity to create and run developer advocacy programs for multiple companies. The first one was a company called DB4O, where I was running an open source project, which was an embedded database. And that was it for me. I decided that I wanted to do developer advocacy instead of focusing exclusively on software development, right? So I enjoyed a lot the interactions with the developer community within an open source project. I was especially interested, so I decided that to focus on those roles. And the last one was at Amazon. I was actually a developer evangelist in the Alexa team. You probably heard of the voice assistant, right? So the question is, why is this is appealing to me? Why am I interested in all of this? So some time ago, I read a book called The Wisdom of Crowds, where there was some farmers in a rural area participating in a kind of contest. They had to guess the weight of a goat, right? So everybody would write down in a piece of paper, how much, what was the weight of this goat, and suddenly the winner was the one that had the closest number, right, to that goat. But someone decided to average all those papers, to create an average of the weight, and that number was super close to the weight of the goat, even better than the best guess, right? So this is just an example of how the collecting wisdom can be very powerful. And that's what really fascinates me. So my job, among other things, would be to make sure that we as a community empower ourselves to get the best out of DHIS2 and work together in supporting each other. So that's my main concern right now. I'll make sure that your voice is heard as a developer, that your feedback translates into positive changes, that the features that you need are incorporated into the queue, which is super important. And of course, that your contributions don't go unnoticed. So we will be running special programs so your contributions, are visible, okay? So I'm sure I will see some of you face to face when we have a chance to meet. They hope we put COVID-19 behind and we do some real live events. So please join me and let's make this community rock together. Thank you, Austin. That's all I have to say for now, but I hope that's a acceptable intro, so people understand what I'm really doing here. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you, Herman. And I know we can't hear our audience, but I'm sure they're all applauding and cheering wildly because I'm excited, and I'm sure that they are too. Yeah. I wish that we could hear them. So if you're excited, please let us know on the community of practice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be monitoring the entry and the community of practice. So if you have questions, please send them there.
Yeah, I was going to actually also allow this, share this very quickly before we move on with the webinar. We do have a community of practice thread for this webinar. So if you go to the community.dhs2.org, the top entry here, it should be the top for a little while, is this, it's talking about this webinar. And you can actually, that's where you're probably watching it right now. We are monitoring this. So if you click this reply button and type a reply, we will be able to answer it live on this webinar as well. So please, if you have any questions, if you're excited about Herman joining the team and what we're going to do together as a community, please click reply and add your feedback on that thread. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the presentation. I'm going to just very quickly, we have a big group of a big developer community, and there are people with different levels of experience with DHIS2, with application development. So I'm just going to give a quick kind of rundown of what an application is in the DHIS2 ecosystem, what the application platform is, and the different components within it. And then I will turn it over to some of my colleagues on the development team who have built some of these great features that we'll be sharing with you today. And what we'll be going over is the new features that have been introduced in the last several months, three or so months, particularly with the version 8 release of the application platform, and what that means for you as developers. So with that, I also wanted to take this opportunity to very quickly show the new application management app in DHIS2 237, which is coming out today. So in DHIS2 237, if you go to app management, you will see something that's very different than the app you saw before. There's a lot more information about the different applications that are currently installed, including the core applications, so the ones that are bundled automatically with DHIS2 when you install it. And in particular, you'll see that on the core apps screen, you can actually see when new versions of those core apps are available. This is part of an effort for the core development team at the University of Oslo to release more quickly applications and allow them to be installed into DHIS2 servers that have been maybe a little bit older. So this will allow you to adopt just a single application, much lower risk to adopt to that new version in DHIS2. And that's all made available through this app management app and the app hub, which is at apps.dhis2.org. You can also see a lot more information about the apps that are coming from that app hub, such as descriptions, screenshots, different versions that are available, contact information, that type of thing. So I wanted to take that opportunity to talk about the app management app, but to take a step back, what is an application? So the 9 squares in the top right corner of this screen is the application selector in DHIS2. If you open that up, you'll see a list of all the apps that have been installed, and there are many more that are available as well. I'll actually show this to you quickly so that we can just see it visually. So if you click on this top right here, you'll see that these are all of the applications that are installed in this DHIS2 instance. Some of these are bundled and available when you install DHIS2 itself. Others you need to manually add to the system because they might be developed by any of you out there. So if we go to this app management application, which is, as I mentioned, has been significantly improved in the 237 release, you can see that we have the ability now to update the app management app to the latest version. There might not be a version that's later than the one that's currently installed. So we can go ahead and click update to latest version. And now we've actually updated this application very quickly from the app hub. So this is what a DHIS2 application is. There are many others that might be installed in your system. As I said, many of these are things that you might use to do data entry or to do maps application, to analyze maps in DHIS2. It might also be something that a third-party developer, not the University of Oslo, has developed. We have a few that are installed on this. In this example, one of those is a training application, which is a very cool cool piece of technology that allows you to walk through the use of different applications in DHIS2. But all of these are, and this one's going to take a minute to load, so I'm not going to wait for it to load. But all of these are different DHIS2 applications that you can build using the tools that we provide in the application platform. What is that application platform? So there are many components within an app. If you've been a DHIS2 developer for a little while, you've probably seen this slide before. There are many different components of what makes up an application. And importantly, most of these things are common to all applications. So they don't need to be re-implemented in every app that you build, every app that we build. And so instead of having to kind of construct an entire web application that takes care of all of these different things collectively, in every single time we build a new application, or you build a new application, or someone in the community builds an application, we have extracted out all of those common pieces and provided them as the application platform tool, and allow the apps to be much smaller, easier to manage, easier to maintain, and also more consistent, because all of those common pieces are shared between the different applications. And importantly, this is something that we use internally in the University of Oslo in the 34 applications that we manage. But it is exactly the same that is provided to anyone else who wants to build a DHIS2 application. So the long-term goal of this app platform is that anything that the University of Oslo and the core developers can do to build a core application should be just as easy and available to third-party developers to build that same application, or something that we haven't necessarily thought of, or that is applicable to a slightly different use case. That's the long-term goal. And there are three major components of this application platform when you actually get down into how to use it to build an app. The first is what we call CLI app scripts, and that allows you to basically gives you tools at development time to more quickly and more consistently develop, test, build, and deploy your application. Birk will talk a little bit about deploying. There's two different mechanisms for deployment from the CLI app scripts. There's one which installs your application directly into a live DHIS2 instance. And then what Birk will talk about is a new functionality to publish directly a new version to the App Hub, which then makes it available in that app management app I showed earlier to other DHIS2 instances in the wild. The second component of the app platform is the runtime, which is a library that helps you interact with the DHIS2 server and the functionality of the app shell. This has no user interface. It's just a functional library that lets you kind of hide away a lot of the complexity of talking to the API and those types of things. And Ismay will talk a little bit about a new functionality in the app runtime that allows caching of data automatically when using the use data query hook in the app runtime. The third component here is UI. We won't talk much about UI today because we're focusing on some of the other functionalities that have been added to the CLI app scripts and the app runtime. But there is an entire UI React component library and design system, which implements the DHIS2 design system and gives you reusable components to use in your own applications. An important one that has been added very recently to UI that may be of interest to many people is the data table components. So if you're interested in that, if that's something you might be looking to use in your application, go to developers.dhis2.org, go to the documentation for the UI library, and you can find some examples of how that is used. And if you have any questions, please post them on the community of practice or in the Slack developer workspace, and we will be happy to answer that. We'll probably have a session webinar specifically on UI components, as we are adding a few more in the near future as well. And we'll talk about that on a separate session. So now to talk about some of the new features that have been added to these app platform components in the last few months, I will turn it over to several of my colleagues. First off, I will turn it over to Mehdi Remy, who it will talk about deduplication and proxy commands. And this is really important because this works around the cookie issue that has been plaguing many developers for quite some time, because Chrome has started to deprecate the cross-site cookies that have enabled a localhost application to talk to a server that's running on a different domain name. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mehdi to talk a little bit about deduplication and proxy commands.
Hi everyone, let me just share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen now? Should be visible. Yeah, cool. Cool, so I've got, sorry, can you guys hear me then? Okay.
I don't see your screen. I don't know if the rest sees it.
I do.
Oh.
Okay, cool. I'll continue and hopefully that'll sort itself out. So yeah, hi everyone, I'm Mehdi and I'm here to talk about two new features which are both implemented as commands in the CLI. So they should all be usable right now if you just upgrade your dependencies. And the first feature is the proxy server. So as Austin said, unfortunately, we've had issues with Chrome removing support for cross-site cookies for security reasons, and that's going to affect many of your workflows. So development is going to serve an application locally at localhost 3000, but then connect an external server, which might be your production server or another instance like a staging server. And unfortunately, since Chrome version 90, cross-site cookies where you're connecting from a locally hosted app to an external server have been deprecated and don't work without workarounds. So previously, we recommended adding these commands and options to your Chrome to your Chrome flags, which did work until this September when Chrome 94 came out and removed these options. So now we've got a new recommended workaround, which is our new proxy server. And what that does is it allows your application to talk to another server locally, so on localhost 8080, which then talks to your external DHIS2 instance. And by having both your application and the proxy on localhost, your browser won't complain as cookies are on the same host. So to use it, it's pretty easy. You just make sure that your CLI app scripts dependency is version 8 or greater. Then you add the proxy option to the start command, and then you pass the URL of your external server. And I've got an example here with a URL, but of course, for your own server, you just put in your own link, and they'll work the exact same way. So by default, the proxy will be on localhost 8080, but it's all like you can change that. And if you've already got something running on 8080, or use 8081, and so on. So once you've run the start command with the proxy option, once you have your login modal, you'll just change your server to localhost 8080 instead of your external server, and everything should work as it normally does. You should not see any difference. If you do, please file a bug and we'll sort that out for you. Now, and I'll do questions for this feature at the end of this presentation. So I'll go through log file validation now, and then any questions for the proxy will also be at the end of this presentation. So, right. So when you add dependencies to your package.json file, your yarn.log file, and your node modules folder will be updated to contain all the dependencies and sub-dependencies required by your application. Now, sometimes that means that if two dependencies depend on the same package, you might get multiple versions of that package. For example, if you have the app runtime version 3 and the CLI app scripts version 8, the new log file will have app runtimes version 3 and 3.2. Because you have two sub-dependencies in your package.json. Even though they're not explicit in your package.json, that's how Yarn will resolve it for you. So although this is harmless most of the time, some dependencies do need global shared state or context, and context is shared within one version of a package. So if you have multiple versions, you have conflicting global state. And while most packages don't need this, the app runtime is one example of a package that does not work if multiple versions are present. Because we need state for things like alerts, for requests, and other things that make your application work well. So unfortunately, Yarn version 1 doesn't deduplicate automatically, but Yarn v2 and v3 do that. Since we don't support Yarn v1, what we've done is implement this validation deduplication for you automatically in the start and build commands. So right now we're only doing that for certain libraries that we know are vulnerable to this issue, susceptible to this issue, such as app runtime, UI, and React, where you only want one single version. So when you run start and build, your log file will be automatically validated, and you'll either get a warning if using start, but if you run build, then we'll actually resolve those issues for you. So in general, whenever you run a start command and we have other validations, we only show warnings, while for build, we do fix those warnings, and it just makes your life easier that way. You can also run deduplicate manually, but in that case, you will have to run yarn install afterwards to sort out your node modules folder. If you run the build command, it will do yarn install after deduplicating, so that should handle everything for you. So in general, you want to run build, but if for some reason you want to check your log file, you can run deduplicate. And I'm happy to take any questions you have right now.
We don't have questions from the community right now.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mehdi. Again, to everyone else, if you have any questions, please post them on the community of practice in that thread, and we will respond to them. I saw that there was a number of welcoming posts for Herman already, so great to see that. I do see one person typing. I don't know if they're going to ask a question or add another congratulatory welcome to Herman, but we can get back to that in a minute when that.
We got it. It's like, can you update the tutorials for our platform? I followed the tutorial, but still was not able to install dev environment. Also, it would be nice if you will ask other core DHIS2 dev to check from time to time the forums and answers to the questions. And yes, we will address that as we go forward. Yeah, absolutely.
And we do need to update some of the documentation on the app platform and some other developer documentation. We are continually growing that, so you'll see more and more coming through. If you have any specific questions that you were struggling with to get the dev environment set up, please share them on the community practice and tag myself or Herman, and we will respond and make sure that gets addressed. If you already have a post that's open, please share it as well, and we'll make sure that we get to that. Thank you. Okay, now next up we have command line app hub publishing. So I'll turn it over to Birk to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, thank you, Austin. Hello, everyone. I'm Birk. I'm a front-end developer here at DHIS2. You might have present a new command to the CLI tool that you hopefully have some experience with, and you can create your apps with. So here you can see the documentation. Can you see my screen now? Hopefully. Yeah.
Yes, I see your screen. It's a little small. Maybe zoom in a little bit.
Okay. So here's the documentation for the D2 app scripts command. This is done to help you upload apps to the app hub. So hopefully you want to share your app with the app hub here. This is apps.dhis2.org, the app hub, and you can log in and upload your own app. So I'll show you how to use this command to upload new versions. So here I have a sample webinar app that I want to add new versions to. So instead of having to manually upload new apps, that might be annoying. Sorry for that right click. My mouse is a little sensitive. But yeah, so instead of doing this manually, we now have a command. You might have seen this before. I presented this during the Experts Academy this summer. But we will reiterate this, and we have made some improvements, and there's still some new stuff coming. So here you can see the Visual Studio Code of this sample app. It's very simple. It's just a platform app initted through the D2 app scripts init. And here we have a D2 config file. So I've added the title to not have like in the package, you need to have like a dash. So we call it webinar app. And then you need the minimum DHIS2 version this app is compatible with to be able to upload it to the app hub. And we need two other major pieces of information here. And the first one is the ID of the app. So after you uploaded it to the app hub, you can go to your URL here and get the ID of the app. We will make this easier to find, but right now this is the way you do it. And then you go to the file here, then you add an ID field with this ID. So this is to be able to, when we upload, to match this app in the app hub. And then to be able to authenticate to the app hub, you go here to the top right and you click your API keys. And here you can see that you can create an API key, and it's important to keep it secret and secure, since this will be able to upload apps from your behalf, and you don't want to get that compromised. So you'll only be able to see this once, and you copy to clipboard here, and then I go back here, and here you can see my terminal. So here I can do export. So I will make this an environment variable, which is the best practice here. Token, and then hopefully you can see it. Is this small as well? Maybe I will try to make it bigger. So here, export D2 app hub token, and then we paste in what we got here. And then we can do, so if we now do yarn version, so now we simulate creating a new version of this app that we want to upload, right? So now we got a new version and the package JSON is uploaded. And then you do yarn build to build your app. I've built it now, but let's do it again. And then after this, we can upload it to the app hub by using the new D2 app scripts command, D2 app scripts publish. So hopefully this will run, creating archive. So if you do D2 app scripts publish, and the cool thing about this command is everything is read from the package and the built scripts. So you don't have to pass anything, any params to the command. Everything is done for you, and the version is uploaded to the app hub. So if we now go to the app again, your apps, webinar app, and you can see we have a new version. So hopefully this will make it easier for you to upload your apps, and you can even integrate this pretty easily with GitHub Actions, since everything is done or read from the commands. You don't need to pass anything. You just need to set up the secret token in your secrets on GitHub. There's if you go to developers.dhis2.org, you go to docs, and then you go here for continuous delivery to app hub. You can follow a guide that will take you through some of the process I did now to get your API key, and then you can set up the ID. And here you can find a sample GitHub action workflow. You can paste into your repository, and then when you go to GitHub and you create a new release, it will automatically build and publish your new build to the app hub. So this way you can integrate our own continuous delivery process and have your app updated and ready, and you don't need to go through the manual process of uploading new versions or emailing versions to others through email or any other way. So hopefully this will help you be able to have your app ready and updated. So I think that's it for me. If there's any questions, we will answer them. And again, I want to refer you to these documentation pages. Here's both one for submitting an app to the app hub, and please follow the guidelines that is linked when you're uploading an app. So if you're uploading an app here, there's a link to the app hub submission guidelines, so we can easily approve your app. And then you can utilize these commands in your further development process. Okay, I think that's for me.
That's great. We don't have questions in the community, so I think we can move to the next presentation, if that's fine, Austin.
Yeah, sounds good. Again, feel free to add any questions you have to the community practice, and we'll answer them here. But thank you, Birk. I know that's something we've presented before, but I think it's really important to highlight that it's a very powerful way to kind of standardize and automate the way you deploy versions consistently to the App Hub. So really good to see that again. And next up, we have in-memory caching and stale while revalidate, which will be presented by Ismay. So I'll just go ahead and turn it right over to you, Ismay, to talk about that.
Yeah, thank you, Austin. Yeah, I will briefly talk about the changes that we've made, new features in the app runtime. I will share my screen. 1 second. Yep. So this is the app runtime repository. Some of you might have already seen that we've enabled stale while revalidate and query deduplication in the app runtime. So I'll briefly go through how it works, what that means. For detailed information, the changelog contains detailed instructions on everything that has changed, what you can do to resolve some dependency issues if you run into those. So make sure to take a look there. These changes were introduced in version 3. And I hope this text is readable. Let me see, I'm getting a message that my screen sharing is paused. Let me see. Just share my terminal.
Still looks, yeah, it's just now we can see your terminal.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, this is a text editor.
Yeah, is that text readable?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So this is a very simple data fetching component, probably quite similar to components that you've written yourself, where you're using data from the backend, using the use data query to fetch it. So what we used to do is, if the hook was loading, loading would be true, you'd render, say, a loading spinner, and then you check for errors, and if everything's okay, you'd render the data. And let's say that the data is refreshed, say someone does something, clicks a button, and the data is fetched again. Then what used to happen is that loading would trigger again, you would get a loading spinner, and et cetera, et cetera. So basically, it would always show the loading spinner. So what we've enabled now, which is called stale while revalidate, is that as soon as you have data, it will skip the loading state, show the old data while the new data is being fetched. And then as soon as the new data has been received, it will just swap out the old data with the new data. So your users will only see the loading spinner when the initial data is being fetched. And after that, it will just show the stale data briefly and swap it out with the new data. You don't have to change anything in your code to sort of opt into this new behavior. It's the new default. So that means that for the new app runtime, as it says here, loading will only be true during the initial load. Now, it's possible that you want to opt out of this behavior. Say you have data where it's really important that it only shows the correct data, and that you say rather have a loading spinner in between. That's possible. For that, we have the fetching property, which is new since version 3. And fetching will basically behave like our old loading property. So you can just get it from the hook here. And if you swap out your loading usage with fetching, it will basically show a loading spinner every time again. So it's a very simple change, but it means that your app in general will feel a lot more responsive because you don't have those loading spinners every time, and you can just keep rendering data. One other thing besides this change is, say you have this component and it has a query And this component is duplicated throughout your app. Say you have like 5, 6 of these components throughout the app. Say something like this. Yeah. So, for example, so, for example, here's the same data component, but it's we're rendering it 3 times here. So what used to happen before version 3 is that it would fire off 3 identical queries, which is a bit of a waste. So what we're doing now is we're deduplicating queries. So as long as there is a query in flight and there are other identical queries happening at the same time, then we just deduplicate them. So we just send one request. You don't have to do anything for that. That happens automatically. It will only deduplicate requests that are exactly identical. So you shouldn't run into any issues with requests that differ slightly, because as soon as it's different, it won't deduplicate it. And that's basically it. So for any detailed instructions, I encourage you to take a look at the changelog, and we'll make sure that the documentation is updated so that it reflects the current state. And if you run into anything, then please let us know, and we'll take care of it. Don't know if there are any questions.
No, we don't have questions right now. There's a question in the community of practice related to authorization of apps, but it's unrelated. So yeah, I think we can move forward. Thank you very much. Nice presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Ismail. Next, we will turn it over to, last but not least, progressive web app support, which is a really big topic that we will introduce here today. Has been added to the app platform, and I will let Kai go ahead and give an introduction to progressive web apps in DHIS2 applications.
Cool. Thanks, Austin. Yeah, there is a lot that could be said about the things that we've been working on here, but I'm going to keep it a little bit short today. And I have prepared a blog post that will cover things that I'll talk about today in a bit more detail, and even a few more things that I'll link to in the community of practice when I'm done speaking. So you can refer to that if you're curious about learning more. Also coming up, there'll be some more detailed blog posts about the tech design that we've done behind it that you might find interesting. But for now, I'll just describe a little bit about what's available, and then point you to some resources to learn some more if you're interested. First thing that I'll mention is that PWA means a progressive web app, which can mean a lot of things, but for our purposes, it means that the app is installable. Like you can add it to a computer or a mobile device, and so it'll behave a bit like a native app. But also, most importantly, that it's offline capable. So you'll be able to take these apps offline and access them while you don't have internet connection, which should be a big deal for apps that are expected to be used in low internet connectivity areas, or in places where the connection is kind of inconsistent. So in the dashboard app, which in 237 will be using these PWA features, I'll use this as an example of the things that we have available. I can just show you now that in the old version of the dashboard app, this is in 236 before it's using the PWA features. If I use this developer tool to simulate being offline and reload the app, we'll see that we don't get any service. The app doesn't run. We don't get the scripts that run the core functionality. If we go to the new one that's available in 237, what we have is that when we go offline, excuse me just a second, gotta log in. I'm running this one on localhost, which is why you saw that login screen. What happens when we go offline is that we can still see the application and this dashboard, which we've saved offline. Now, not all the dashboards are saved offline. And that introduces the next thing that we have as part of the suite of features that we have here. We call these dashboards here, or the thing that we wrap them in, cacheable sections. So to be able to save an individual bit of content in the app offline without saving all of them offline is what we've enabled, so that you can save an individual dashboard without saving potentially dozens or hundreds of dashboards. So this one's already saved offline here, but when you use a cacheable section and wrap a section with that, what you can do is in the dashboards app here, we have this make available offline button. What that'll do is it'll reload this section, use this mask to block interaction with the screen. And then we have a tool that listens to the network requests that are sent as this section of content loads, and it'll save it in an offline cache. So now we see this notification here that this section has been saved offline. And if we simulate being offline with the developer tool and reload the app, we can still see this content that we have saved. So in the app platform, we made a React API to enable these cacheable sections for your apps as well. And I can show you a quick example of what that code looks like in a moment. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that now. There are two main features. There's a hook that accesses the controls for starting a recording to capture that section offline. And then around this simulated dashboard here, we have this cacheable section wrapper that goes around it and controls reloading the section and putting the loading mask over it. So you can go and check out the blog post to check out more details about that. But that's just a little preview of what that looks like. And another feature that is part of this suite of tools, let's see, here we go. Yeah, is, hang on, I need to move my Zoom tools a little bit here. Okay, you can also see this offline indicator here. This is another tool that's available with the suite of offline tools that's available in the runtime, is that we have a hook that can tell you whether your device is online or offline at a given time. So we have this indicator in the header bar up here, tells you that we're offline. It's also used in other places around the dashboard app, like in this button here. Some features are disabled while offline, like creating a new dashboard or filtering the dashboard. So that's useful if you're just working with functionality in apps that should be offline capable. One thing that you might see as you're working with a PWA app is that updates to the app need to happen in a new way. Because this app caches the core scripts that run the app, and they're kind of installed in the browser and run from there instead of being accessed from the server. Whenever there's a new app available, you'll need to install those new scripts to run the app. And so you see an update or a prompt like this that gives you the option to update the app. And when you click that, it should reload. And then you'll have the new version of the app. And you'll need to do that the first time that you upload and use the offline capable version of an app. These tools have some drawbacks and catches and need to be designed around. So they're provided on an opt-in basis. You opt in by setting a setting in your d2.config.js file. The option is pretty simple. It's just adding PWA enabled is true. And then you get the basic offline functionality, the offline caching tools. You'll need to do a bit more setup if you're using the cacheable sections, but that's described in the documentation here. There are some other caveats about security, as in the data that's cached offline here can be inspected by a malicious actor who gets access to a device. So you want to take extra precautions when you're thinking about applying this in an app. You want to make sure that you have good safety practices in place if this is going to be used in an app that's going to be used on shared devices. And you want to be aware of the potential drawbacks there. There are some tools that we have here. For example, if you use the logout function in the header bar, it will clear the sensitive data that you might have cached offline. And then when you log back in, you'll see that the cache dashboards are no longer available. The same thing happens if you log in as a new user. The sensitive caches will be cleared. Coming up next in the PWA features will be encryption of the offline data as the first thing that we'll be working on so that it can handle sensitive data on shared devices better. We'll also be working on some cache normalization to improve performance and storage capability. I'll be working on that blog post describing the tech developments that should come out in the coming week or two. And then to wrap up, I'll just share some links to this blog post and the relevant documentation in the platform and runtime documentation sites, and I'll add those to the community of practice. I'll just take a peek here, see if there are any questions. Looks like there are none. So that's all for me. I'll pass it back to the hosts. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Guy. As you mentioned, there's a lot that we could talk about how that works under the hood and some pretty cool technology that we're using to enable offline capabilities in our applications in a generic way. And I'm really looking forward to the technical deep dive that you're writing about that, which will be really cool to share with the community. And I think it's just even if you don't know anything about DHIS2, it's really cool technology and stuff that we're working on. I did see that there are two people currently posting something in terms of questions. First one is for Ismay. Does the refetch display a loading indicator using a refetch component? I'm not sure exactly what that means, but does that mean something to you, Ismay?
Not the refetch component, but I assume that the question is asking also whether the loading state will always be triggered when you're refetching. So it depends, because currently with our refetch, you can pass new variables. Say you have some variables in your query. So that can mean that basically it's a different query. It's not exactly the same as the previous one. So there won't be any cache data. So that means that the loading state will be triggered again. It's also possible that you're refetching without passing any new variables. So if it's just a refresh of the same data. So if you're doing that, if you're not really changing the query, then it will show the stale data by default and basically show the stale data while it's revalidating. So it depends on whether you're refetching with new variables or not. And I guess that's what's meant with the refetch component, basically the loading spinner. If not, then let me know. But that's basically what will happen.
Great. Thanks. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to post them on the community practice now or in the future as well. So this will be available as a recording in the same community practice post where you're probably watching it now. We will have the YouTube video of this webinar available. And so if you have any questions when you're watching this video after the fact, or if you have any questions when you look through the documentation or try to use some of these features, please feel free to post them there on the community practice. You can also post them in separate topics if they're unrelated or not directly related to the content of this topic. Herman, is there anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of the community or next steps? I know we have a few things that we're kind of looking at, but if not, we'll probably wrap it up pretty soon.
Yeah, first of all, we need to try to improve the developer journey, to make it smoother for everybody. And then working on specific programs to enhance contributions and to also recognize contributions. But I basically have one very small comment, which is feel free to PM me in the community of practice. If you feel like you have ideas, on how to improve the community, on what kind of programs we should be working on, etc. Very glad to receive feedback, on how we can make the community better together. Just that.
Yeah, great. Really looking forward to it. And thank you very much to all of our presenters today. Really exciting features that we've added to the developer tooling. And really looking forward to seeing what apps are developed using these new features. Again, please feel free to post any questions you have on Slack or on the community practice to Herman and the rest of the team. And with that, I think we will wrap it up for today. So thank you all very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.